And tonight I am going to be using this fabulous book by Jennie Rayment. I love all things Jennie Rayment. And today we are going to be using what's known as the Sling bag, and we're going to be making one of these. Now, what I love about this bag, it only uses 4 fat quarters. And what's left over once you've cut it? Now, I'm using Imperial fat quarters, so these are the ones you get in America. That's it. That's all that's left over. So there's a tiny bit of wastage, but not that much. I'm more than happy to get rid of that for making this fabulous bag. And the great thing is, fully reversible. I love it. So what I've done here is you'll see I've chosen the two-tone colors over here. So I use the blue with the yellow, and I put the blue and the yellow as the handle. And on this one, I had the pink and this. So I did the pink and the handle. But when I look at it this way, I didn't quite think this through because obviously the yellow matches there, but this doesn't match that because I've done it there. So the great thing is I've done a trial run. So this time around, when I do it, I'm going to change everything around. So I've got my book. I've got everything ready to go. And I'm going to now try and show you how it is you make this gorgeous bag. Now, remember, you will need to... Oh, forgive me. I am trying to just reposition my... I'm not very good at this, can you tell? There we go. I'm just trying to make my stand be a bit smaller. One day I will have that professional YouTube studio we should all have, but today is not that day. So what I've got is I've got four fat quarters. You've got to cut 2 rectangles out of them. I've chosen these 2 for one section, and then I have chosen these for my second section. Now, when you are doing this, there is a very, very good demonstration in here as to what it is you need to do. So I'm going to show that to you now. And what's important is you just get this bit right in your head before you start, okay? So the first thing is, this piece here, we're going to call number 1. This piece here, we're going to call number 2. This piece here, we're going to call number 3. And this piece here, we're going to call number 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Now, it's really, really simple. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew this short edge onto the long edge. So 3 is going to go onto number 4. And the short edge of number 2 over here is going to go onto the long edge of number 1. Okay? So I know that doesn't make sense at the minute. Just trust me, I know what I'm saying. So that short edge is going to go on there. That short edge there is going to go on here. And once you've got these 2 pieces together, you're then going to join those together into this cross section. Now, the thing that is important to know when you do this, when you're doing the inside, the lining, you're going to do it exactly the same. But what you need to remember is obviously, if I did this identically, they wouldn't fit together. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to lay this down, wrong side forward. And this one, wrong side forward. And this one, wrong side up. And this one, wrong side up. Because what's going to happen then is you've got your right sides together. So if you actually then fold this back out exactly as it is, it's going to be in the opposite direction to what it is now, because you need that in order to then sew this all together to work. Now, that's one of the most important things you need to know on this pattern, is that you're going to be doing the inverse for one of the sections. This will be exactly right. So that'll be 1, that'll be 2, that'll be 3, and then your black and white one under here will be 4. But when you're doing this way round, it's going to be ever so slightly different. So your layout for the inside section is actually going to be like that. It's going to be opposite to what's on the inside. Ask me how I know. Trust me, do it this way. Then you won't have to unpick the bag like I did. So let's get this party started. we are going to lay this all out over there by my machine. I've got everything ready to go, and I'm going to be uber professional, and I'm going to drag you. Oh, and you've got to, sorry, and your handles. You've got to cut your handles out. I'm going to be uber professional. I'm going to drag you around the office like this. Hello, sorry I'm making you all ill by dragging you around. Come on. Sorry, won't be a second. If I was a professional, this would have all been organised. I will learn, I will grow, we will get there. First of all, let me pull this back up. Come on. Right, so we're now going to lie everything. Hi Anne, how you doing? Right, so first things first, I'm going to open my book to page 18 where the pattern is, and I'm going to lay my fabric out the way it needs to be. First things first, you're going to have number 1. I'm going to try and lift this up a little bit more. And a little bit out, so you get a bit of a better view there. Come up a little bit, there we go. So, this is number 1. I have learned if you don't plug your phone in, it normally goes flat. So, this is number 1. This is number 2. This is number 3. And this is number 4. Okay. Now, I've got my teeth pointing in towards each other. It doesn't matter. So what you need to make sure is you're getting the short edge of number 3 onto the long edge of number 4. Okay. I am using Orifel thread. It is my preferred thread. You must use what you prefer. Come on. And I'm just lining this up as closely as possible to get it accurate. Now, I'm using a normal 1/4 inch seam. And when you're using a normal 1/4 inch seam, you just make sure you're consistent all the way through your stitching process. I am doing a little back and forth at the beginning of these, only because you're going to manipulate the fabric a little later. You don't need to, but I just found it a little easier for me. Okay, this little seam here, there is a little bit of tension on it as you sew, because when you're doing a bit of manipulation of the fabric. Now also pressing is important on this. So what you do is I pressed this bit down towards this section here, because this bit of fabric okay, so you can see this piece of fabric is completely flat then. That's all I chose to do and is what the pattern recommends. And if Jenny tells me to do something, I'm gonna do it. So exactly the same as what we did previously. I'm lining my short edge over here up with my long edge. And I'm then going 1/4 inch down the side. Sorry, I had a phone call in. Okay, and then again, I'm pressing the same way I did on the bottom 2 sections. Okay, so I've got that nice and flat over this way, so you can see my seam is pressed that way. And then all you're doing now, lining these 2 pieces up so that the seam in between there, hi Zoe, the seam there matches beautifully. So that's what we're doing over there. And because we pressed our seams in the same direction, you should be able to nest these seams beautifully, and you'll be able to feel over there where they've met, where those two seams meet. Okay? And just like before we've done on the other two sections, you're sewing the short edge to the long edge, and on the other end, you're sewing the short edge to the long edge. If you have a locking stitch like my machine does, I would do a little locking stitch, or just do a quick back and forth, whatever you prefer doing. Just be consistent with your seam all the way through. Okay, so now we've created a little windmill. I am going to press my seam here, just very quickly press my seams down. And there we go. We have now created our first section. Now, as I showed you before, what you need to do is you need to make sure that we have these identically. So right side of fabric to right side of fabric. You're going that way. Oh, come on. And again over here, right side of fabric to right side of fabric. Put that over there. And on this side as well, we've got right side of fabric to right side of fabric over here. So we've only got the wrong side of the fabric pointing up. This is important. Make sure you get it the right way. So over here, you've got everything laying on top of each other, but you've got the wrong side of the fabric pointing up. You're now going to repeat the process exactly like it says in the pattern. And you're going to sew this short edge over here onto this long edge over here. Okay. Anybody else lose the foot of their sewing machine quite regularly? Right. Okay, so just like I did on the last side, my longer section here, I'm going to press my seam over that way. You can do it another way if you choose. That's what is recommended. Hopefully. Okay, so I've now pressed my seam. And now that it's pressed, I'm going to put that back on top of where it was before. And then this one, exactly the same thing, short edge to long edge, exactly like what I've done already. And I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch down that side over there. And just like before, pressing my seam out. And I'm putting that back exactly where it was before. And now exactly the same thing. I'm sewing this section onto this section, making sure that they nest beautifully on that little seam in the middle over there. Okay? Just like before, I'm sewing the short edge from the edge of the short edge over there to the edge of the short edge on this side over there. So now what will happen is you have two pieces that are identically, once you put them top on top, they're identical. But when you turn it round, they're completely different because obviously they are inverse. I'm just going to press that final seam. Okay, so this second section, I'm just going to put to one side at the moment. So this is my second section. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this, and we just changed tacks a little bit here. And what we're going to do is you're going to sew, this is number A, and this is number B. Okay, this is all in the pattern, so if you're getting lost, don't worry, it's all in the pattern. I'm going to sew this short edge onto this long edge. And then when I'm finished, I'm going to sew this short edge onto that long edge. And then I'm going to sew this short edge onto that long edge. And then I'm going to sew this short edge onto that long edge. And what we're looking to do is you're going to create a little basket of sorts. Let me do it first, and then you'll understand what I mean. Okay? Okay, so I've sewn this short edge onto the long edge over here. I'm now rotating this ever so slightly, and I'm sewing this short edge over here onto this long edge over here. Right? I'm hoping that makes sense. If not, the book is so reasonably priced. There are so many lovely patterns in this book. You will easily be able to get that from either Jennie Rayment's website directly or the gorgeous Natasha Makes. She has them on there as well. The Natasha Makes one, I think there's actually a little special as well on the books. So you'll be able to enjoy that as well. Now, when you are sewing these, I do think it's important to always keep account of how many you've sewn on, okay? So I've sewn one there. This is number 2. I've got 2 more to go. So I rotate again, 145 degrees. I've got a short edge over here. That short edge is going to be sewn onto this long edge over there. This first little bit is important to get right, otherwise you end up with a little pucker in your fabric, and that is the last thing you want. So there we go, I've got that all lined up beautifully. And again, 1/4 of an inch all the way down this seam. Now on this side, you don't need to worry about leaving a hole, but on the second side we're about to sew, there you will need to leave a hole. Only because you have to turn this bag through, and if you don't leave a little hole, you're going to be a bit stuck turning the bag round. Ask me how I know. Now we've got our last short side over here to sew onto our long edge over there. This is my short side going onto this long side. This is now the 4th seam in this little, on this one side of the bag. Right. So what I meant by a little basket bit is that's what you're going to end up with. You've got four little pointy up bits, and then you've got this whole bag lining thing here. So that's what we're looking for. That is the section that you're looking for. I'm just going to trim off these extra threads that I've got here. I'm using my second sewing machine because I had a slight problem with my first one yesterday. And right, so we're almost done. So that is our first little bag ready to go. Okay, so that's one of the sides. Now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but with the other section. So what will happen now, you noticed before I was going clockwise. This way it's identical, but I'm going anti-clockwise because this is sewn together differently. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew this short edge here onto that long edge there, this short edge there onto that long edge there, this little short edge there onto this long edge here, and this short edge onto this long edge there. So it is exactly the same methodology. I'm just going the other way round. But you need to remember, and I do it on my first seam because then I won't forget. What you're going to do is you need to leave a hole to be able to turn your fabric through when you then come to put the bag together. So I'm going to just do this little section here. Okay. Now this bit I definitely want to leave a locking stitch because when you turn this through, it is a very, very big bag to turn through. I'm leaving about 2.5, 3 inches worth of gap to turn through. Personally, I'd rather have a bigger gap to make sure that it turns through comfortably without really ripping it or anything. And then I'm doing another locking stitch when I reposition my fabric to start the end of this last seam. Okay, so now I have actually done my hole, so I can easily turn everything through with this hole there. So I'm very happy with that. Okay, so I turn this back. This is the seam that I started with. Now I've got a short edge over here. I'm going to sew that onto my long section over here. So my short edge over here is going to go onto my long section over there. Okay, now you can do this either way. I'm going to start from the outer going into the inner. Jenny does recommend you do it the other way. So actually, as I said, I was going to do that. I could hear Jenny screaming in my ear going, "Our John, that's not right. Do it like I wrote it." And Jenny's been doing this for longer than I care to say because she's only 37 and she's doing really well. For any age, to be fair, Jenny's one of the fittest people I know. So kind and so lovely. But Jenny can, I'm not saying she is, she could be a little scary if you don't quite listen to what you're being told. I'm joking, Jenny. You're amazing and I love you to bits. So exactly like before, you can see I've done these two sides here. They're joined together, except it's got my little hole there. And I've just rotated it 145-degree rotation. And I've got a short edge here that's going to be sewn onto my long edge over there, starting from the center of the bag, going to the outer section. And here we go. Right, so we've done 3 out of 4 sections now. You can see our little bag starting to take shape here. So all I'm doing now is this last short edge, I'm sewing onto this long edge over here, right? I'm hoping I'm still keeping you, everybody's following and getting everything okay there. And these little sections, they just take a little while for you to maneuver and get the fabric flat and the way you want it to lie. And you'll just feel that everything will just pop into place. And there you go. We just put that then through the sewing machine and sew up that seam when you're ready. Okay, so now we have another section that looks exactly like our first section. Okay, it looks perfect. Now, when you put these together, it's really important, ask me how I know, to make sure you turn one of them inside out. Okay, because what you need to make sure you have is right side to right side. Okay, and it's very easy to get it wrong, so make sure right side to right side. And then just slowly but surely, you put the bags one inside the other, like this. Okay? Get everything nice and lined up. And what we're looking to do is oh, sorry, I've managed to catch a bobbin there. What we're looking to do is we're going to sew along these 8 outstanding sections on the outside of the bag. So we've got one there and one there. But we need to make sure that everything's lining up perfectly, because the last thing we want is this knot to meet. And I think that looks pretty okay. So we're going to sew along all 8 of the outer seams and make sure that everything's all lined up. And we're going to sew down there, up there, down there, up there, down there, up there, down there, up there, down there, up there. And we're going to do that for all 8 sides. Now, I didn't have a preference whether I started at the top or the bottom. I personally started directly off the top and went 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Just want to double check. I think Jenny does say 1/4 of an inch. Just want to double check. Yes, she does. We will come to the trimming of the seams and the clipping of the valleys and all of that, and the trimming of the peaks when we are finished sewing all the way around, okay? Now, you don't need to go back and forth on this at all. You just need to make sure that your fabric, you're guiding it all the way through. And if you want to nestle your seams as you go along, that is absolutely fine. And by that, I mean, as you get to a trough, we're going to call it a trough and a valley, because obviously you're sewing down the trough, your fabric should nest together beautifully. And what I do is I stitch to a couple of stitches past the trough, make sure my needle's down, rotate my project, make sure my fabric's all lined up beautifully on the return journey, lower my presser foot, and I sew all the way along up the peak, as it were. And then as I get closer to the edge of my peak, I make sure again that my needle is down. I rotate my project, line up my trough so that my seams are nestled again. Make sure that the edge of the fabrics are lined up beautifully. Plop that down. And exactly the same thing on this side of the... And you're going to do that 4 times in total, where you're going down the valley and up the peak. Exactly like before. Rotate your project, leaving your needle down. Make sure that your fabric is all lined up perfectly over here. And as you sew down this edge here, you've got a 1/4 inch seam all the way along. My fabric is naturally going to that position already. I think that's luck, because on the first bag it didn't work quite as easily. But there we go. I had a few problems on the first way round. And exactly like before, we're on our 3rd one now. Again, nestle my seams. Get that all beautifully lined up. And straight down the side towards the 3rd trough. Okay. I let go a moment ago there, which was a mistake. Oh, but that lines up beautifully. Very happy with that. That's brilliant. Needles down. Pull my fabric over. Now over here I've got an ever so slight overhang on the top than I do the bottom. I'm just going to manipulate my fabric here so that that is as flat as it can be. I have got a tiny little bit of overage on my top piece of fabric, and I'm going to move that down to the bottom of the trough so that any little ripples won't appear. And I think I did that okay. Maybe I didn't. I'm not too worried. If anybody ever criticizes the fact that my trough isn't quite even enough, well, there we go. That's a them problem. This one is lined up beautifully. Didn't even need to manipulate it. It's just lined up perfectly. And just like before, I'm leaving my needle down, rotate my project, and I'm now on the last piece of, the last elevation, if you will, right at the edge of the fabric. And voila, we have now sewn together all of the inner and outer of the bag. So before we turn it around, you can see this is all worked out beautifully. It's all flat and lined up gorgeously. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to look for that little hole that I left for my turning around. And where have I left it? It is here. There it is. No? There it is. Okay, so all I'm doing now is I've got my little hole here. I'm now going to reach in. Oh, sorry, no, I'm glad I checked the pattern. Don't do that just yet. Make sure you keep your peaks and valleys up. And what you need to do is your little valleys, so where you've got your peaks at the top here, what you need to do is just trim your peaks over here so that when you turn your bag around, you won't have any excess fabric at the top. So you'll have 4 little peaks to nip off the top there. And I'm not saying go right down to the edge. You're just going to go, and you can see, maybe you can see it a bit better there. There's my stitch line, just over there. And all I'm doing is I'm just nipping off a little bit there. So you can see I've just taken a little bit of fabric off. And then where my troughs are over here, I'm going to cut in the trough just so that when the fabric needs to manipulate and to be moved, you haven't got that excess fabric that you're trying to make a flat edge out of. And you're not cutting it very deep. Check the pattern. The pattern explains to you very carefully where it is. Unfortunately, the way this has come, the colors that I've chosen, you won't see that very clearly. Or maybe on this one, sorry, you can see it there. So all I've done over there is I've trimmed my edge down there. It's not a lot. It's probably about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, at that point, you then turn your bag around. And in, I grab the furthest corner over there, and I pull it out, and I just gently pull the fabric through all the way, and you can tell it's going to be a thing of beauty. Okay, so now each one of these little corners, you're going to make sure that you push it out. Use a chopstick or a coffee stirrer, or just use whatever device you want, because you want to make sure that all your little points are as high and as out as they can be. Okay. Right, so that one's there, and that one's there. And you just manipulate these points all the way out if you can. If you do need to use a coffee stirrer, you have got that little hole in your bag still. So you can go in with a coffee stirrer and you can make sure that you get this out as pointy and as perky as you like. So there we go. I've only got one left to go, which is over here. And now all that's missing is our handles. So the inside section of our bag is now ready. I then just give this a little bit of a press. I'm a bit pressed for time tonight, so I'm not going to press it now. I'll press it after. But what you're going to do is you're going to sew one handle there to there, and then I sewed the other handle from there to there. So your bag looks like that. If you want to crisscross them, you can. I just found that a little awkward because I couldn't quite figure out how you put things in there. So you do it how you choose. Now the handles, do you remember I showed you at the beginning? I'm going to make sure that my brown and my orange are with my inside section over there, and that my 2 black and white sections are going to be visible on this edge. Okay, so how I do that is I make sure that I've got one with one, and I make sure that I put them right sides together, and then I'm going to sew up this edge, across this little edge, down this edge, and then turn the piece around. Remember to make sure your pieces are right side together. Usual 1/4 inch seam all the way down. Now I'm going to make sure that my needle is down and I don't quite get to the edge. I'm leaving a 1/4 inch down the bottom, and then I rotate the handle till I get to a 1/4 inch again, needle down. And exactly like the last time, I'm now going to go down the long edge of this piece. Okay, so that's my first handle. I'm going to multitask and I'm going to do both handles at the same time. So I'm now going to go straight on to doing the second handle. As I do that, I've got my needle down. I'm just going to trim off my first handle. So this is my first handle where I've got the black and white on one side and my brownie ones on the other. I am going to make sure that I nip this little bit on the corner here. So you can see I have nipped these little corner bits off. That just means there's slightly less fabric to try and manipulate as you turn this all through. And once I've turned it all through, you'll see that if you're doing it this way, it is going to cause there to be some enormous wrinkling of your fabric. Before I stitch everything down, I'm going to make sure I get my corners out as much as possible. And if needs be, I've got a trusty little long pointy sticky, very technical term. This is where your purple thang comes in, or your coffee cup stirrer, or your chopstick. And you can see that that's come out really well. You can tell I've got that out really well. Get that nice and flat. And then what you do is you just press that down and get that as nice and flat as you can. Because having turned that inside out, you can see you've got lots of wrinkles on your fabric. So just give yourself that little bit of extra je ne sais quoi in getting it right. So just like with handle 1, I'm making sure that I'm stopping a 1/4 inch beforehand, rotating my project to the short edge, sewing a 1/4 inch down the side there, get to a 1/4 inch again, putting my needle down, and then I'm just going straight down this long edge as well. Oh, I accidentally pressed my locking stitch, so apologies for that. And there we go. We have now sewn the second handle all the way down there. And just like before, I'm nipping off the extra bits of fabric here in the corner. Just like before, you can see I've nipped those little bits off there. And now I'm just rotating this through or turning this out. Using my little sticky thing to make sure it's as flat as it can be and as much as pointy as we can get it. And there we go. So like I did on the other one, I'm now going to go and press this flat. So you can tell I've now pressed that as flat as it can go. That's turned out beautifully on that end. And then on this end, we've got our raw edge. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to fold my fabric in 1/4 of an inch, or roughly 1/4 of an inch. There you go. And I'm now going to leave that there. I'm going to hold that with my fingers. And then I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch along there and top stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way around this handle. Now, don't be worried if you get this wrong. If you end up being a little more than 1/4 of an inch, that's okay. If it's a little less, that's okay too. Just be consistent, because this is one of the details on your bag. If anybody ever does look at your bag, this is going to be one of those sections they're going to look at. If you want to use contrasting thread, that'll be great. If you want to use complementary thread, that works very well. I have used an orange on one end and a black and multicolored on the other side. So I think contrasting thread is going to be quite hard. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually just using a cream in Aurifil for the top and a cream for the bottom. And that way it should just blend in beautifully on the black and white. And then on my orange, it should have a little bit of a pop, which I'm quite excited about. I think it'll look really good. Okay, and again, when I get to the top, I'm just leaving a little bit less than 1/8 of an inch to catch up there. And I'll show you in one moment. I've just got to go straight down the side. This is ever so slightly bigger than 1/4 of an inch. That's my choice. If you want to do 1/8 of an inch, do. If you want to do dead on 1/4, do as well. It's your bag. You must do it how you choose. You're the one who's got to use it. So you can see I've done that now all the way down there in that cream. And on the edges, I've done it that way. And on that one, I've done it that way. And then on the back, you can just see that little hint of cream as you go along. I'm doing that now for the second handle. I'm just pressing this down using the iron at the moment. Right, so just like before, that's all nice and flat. All of us have always got these odd threads all over. And then what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing. I'm going to rotate that down just 1/4 of an inch. I normally go down 1/2 an inch and then pull it up a little bit. So you can tell that I've got that in there perfectly. And exactly like before, I'm just going to go and now top stitch all the way around. I went a little quickly there, and my 1/4 inch went a bit off the mark there. If you do that, which we all have moments like that, not all of us are doing YouTube tutorials to make the bags in the first place. If you do that, you can go back and unpick that. It's your call. For me, I'm not too worried. And you can see my seam went a little bit funny on the bottom there, but I'm okay with that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm now going to attach my handles to the bag. Now, because I want these to be lined up with my fabric over here, I'm going to give that you're going to be attaching the handles over here. So what will happen is you will take your handle and you're going to line it up. Oh, you do it two ways, sorry. First things first. You're going to use a ruler and you're going to mark it out in the middle of this section here. So the first thing you're going to do is when the bag's on like that, and you can see the handle is there, you're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch along there. Okay, that's the first thing you're going to do. Just checking I've got it the right way round. And again, I would use a locking stitch on the edges of these. You can do it how you choose. You don't have to. That's just what I would do there. So your handle is now attached. But what you want to do now is you want to fold this up. And you want to get it as flat as possible. So I'm now going to just press this down. Okay, so all I've done now is I've pressed that up. That's nice and flat. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this round and you'll see you've got this point over here from the bag. And what I'm going to do is I'm now going to sew 1/4 of an inch up there and 1/4 of an inch down there to be able to re-secure the bag. Once I've done that, once I've sewn 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch up there, I'm also going to do a second stitch over here. So like Jenny's bag points out, you're going to do a full triangle stitch there. So you can see she's gone up there, gone down there, and across there. So that's how we're just going to make sure that the handle is as secure as possible on your bag. Okay. I am starting by doing a locking stitch. You don't have to, whatever works best for you. Oh, come on. And my needle is down. I get to the edge, it's 1/4 of an inch. I rotate my entire project, line my 1/4 inch line up with my sewing foot. And I get down to the bottom of the handle. And again, just like before, leave my needle down, rotate my whole project. I've got 1/4 of an inch towards the bottom. And I'm now going to sew a second supporting seam. And as I get to the back, to the next section, I then do a locking stitch to finalize that. And I will hopefully, once I've trimmed all these little bits off, you will see that is the little triangle that I'm looking for. Okay, so my handle is now attached perfectly. And now I'm going to repeat that 3 times. And I'm going to do this one over here. So it's exactly the same thing. Oh, someone has put a comment on. What was that? Not quite sure what that was. Sorry, girls and boys. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing again. We're going to take this, make sure that it's the right sides together. We're going to put that down here. We're going to line that up with our square and we're going to do a stitch line along there. Okay, just like we did on the previous handle. I do keep my little piece of, my little scissors nearby just to trim off these extra threads as I go. It just makes my life that little easier, getting rid of these extra threads as I go. So I've now sewn that section on here. I'm now going to push this back and I'm going to press the seam and get ready to fold it back. Okay, so I've pressed my seam there. I then fold this back along the line, just like I did over here, and then I'm going to sew my triangle in that section again. Just like I did before, I'm starting with my needle down. I'm doing a locking stitch to start us off. And then I'm sewing a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. The needle is down. I'm lifting that up so that I can come down the other side, hopefully as close to the 1/4 inch as I can. And then last but not least, I've got that second line to go. And I'm now going to sew all the way down this base. And now we have one handle on completely. You're now going to repeat that again to put the second handle on. So we've done our first handle, and you can tell that that handle is now going to tie in with all the colors that we've got over here. And then when we turn it round, it's going to be the same thing. Now, the only thing to just remember is obviously we have got our little hole in our packet, in our bag over here. So you can either go and stitch that on by hand, which will be a lot neater. And I would recommend you do this, but by hand, because your bag being reversible, the last thing you want is a top stitch section over there when the rest of the bag isn't top stitched, because your eye will go straight to that and you won't quite know what you're looking at. So exactly like before, you're going to stitch this section on here. Pressing that down. And then last but not least, on this third section, after this, there's one more to go. You're doing exactly the same. You're sewing a 1/4 inch triangle all the way up this handle. I'm going to do exactly what I've done all the way through this process. Start with my needle down, starting with a locking stitch at the very beginning, and then 1/4 inch all the way through. One more to go after this, and you can tell how quickly it is to make this gorgeous bag. I'll go back and trim all of that later. Next, we've got this last little seam over here. exactly like before. I'm going to sew along there, press it, and then fold it back. Jenny suggests you are a lot more accurate with this and you pin everything. Please, you must follow the pattern with Jenny. She knows exactly what she's doing. It's her pattern after all. I'm just doing this for ease of time, so you take what's best for you. Okay, and then last but not least, we've got this little section over here. Last seam of the bag. So now we have finished what we've been making. Now I've still got a bit of pressing to do here and there, but that is our gorgeous sling bag. And you can tell it's a beautiful, beautiful design. If you want it to be the other way round, all you do, you just flick it round. And you've got this beautiful, beautiful bag. Very, very attractive. You can match it to any outfit that you're going to make and go out with. All I've got left to do now, as I've said previously, is I need to sew up my little hole over here, which I'll do by hand. And that brings me to the end of this demo. The Jennie Rayment sling bag from page 18 on Sew Pieces in Jennie Rayment's fabulous book. Get that on www.jennieraymont, and that's Jennie Rayment, RAYMENT.com, failing which the gorgeous www.natashamakes.com. Have a little look there. It's a gorgeous book with loads and loads of different patterns. That is just one of them. Really, really fun, gorgeous fabric boxes and things like that. And you will not regret any of Jennie Rayment books. Have a fabulous evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your company. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, I would be so grateful. And I will see you again on the next demo. Look after yourselves. Stay well. Bye.